Hello and welcome to another part of our live stream for the Highlight Coding Club. So we're continuing on with sort of this Java type thing. So let's jump on in. So when we last sort of like started on this or last left off, we had this basically where we can control this thing with a up, down, left, right sort of thing. Change color depending upon whether we're pressing up, down, left, or right as well. The background does. So now what we can do is stop this and let's think about our next set of things that we want. Let's try to make maybe sprites and sprite sheets and stuff like that, perhaps, and then we'll kind of work our way from that. So there's a couple of other things I want to do. I need a couple of interfaces to say something can be rendered or something can be updated. So I'm going to do like some sort of interfaces to be renderable or updatable. So it's going to still be inside the engine. So let's make a new Java class. And it's going to be an interface. Let's say this one's iRenderable. It's our interface there. Okay. So now that we've got this iRenderable interface, we can basically give it, it's like a contract. So what we're saying here is anything that's a renderable has to implement a public void render method that takes in a screen. So that's it. That's all we want it to do. We want it to be able to do that. So I'd save that. Now I want the same sort of concept for an updatable sort of interface. So I think I'm trying to think where I want those. Inside the engine, new package, let's say interfaces or something. Let's drop that iRenderable into the interfaces and refactor that. There we go. So inside that interface, I also now want the same sort of thing, but for updates. So Java class interface iUpdatable. Let's add that to the source control. So similar sort of thing. This wants a contract to say you must implement update. So a public void update. That's it. It's just like literally just explaining to it, hey, you have to implement this. So if you're updatable, then you have to implement update. So that's it for the interface. That's just to get some stuff prepped, ready to do other things. So back into the graphics, I want to have a sprite that can have a texture pushed into it. So we'll kind of do that. So let's have a look. Inside graphics, we'll make a new Java class called Sprite. And that sprite will literally just pretty much contain a texture. So let's say texture, and then we'll have a public sprite that takes in texture, and then it just sets this dot texture equal to texture. And that'll do for now. We can always build on that. Now, the other thing what I want is kind of a sprite sheet where we're loading a bunch of sprites in or loading an actual sheet of sprites. So we want to load in based upon some sort of path. And we'll kind of load in the pixels as such. So let's make a new class called Sprite Sheet this time. And this is just sort of setting the stage ready for further items. So for this one, I want it to have a path to the file. So private string path and private int array pixels. And then it's going to instantiate public Sprite sheet. And that's going to take in a path. And it's going to say this dot path equals path. We also want to do some sort of a create sprite. So public void create. We haven't really decided on the implementation of this yet, so we'll just there we go, implement this at some point. So we've got this construct here ready to do stuff with. So that'll be those. Now, a couple more things I want to work with is thinking about other things like entities, like an entity system of some sort, where we can have this entity which can contain maybe just different things. Like it's got to have an X and a Y. Then maybe it'll take in something like a level or somewhere where it resides, or you know, just something. But also want this to be implementing runnable and updatable, so that it has to have a run and an update. Also want to be able to like remove it off wherever it is. So it's like this simple basic construct of an entity. It could be some sort of a event. It could be a player. It could be a movable object. It could just be a static object that's in some sort of level where it's just there, you know. So it can be used for lots of different things. So inside the engine, we'll make a new package called entities. And inside the entities, we're going to make a new entity class. And like I said, this class is going to implement renderable even. Implements renderable, and also updatable. And that's going to need to implement a couple of things like update and render. But what we can do is, instead of it having to do that, we can just turn around and say it's public abstract class, so it's never ever instantiated. But now it doesn't have to implement because it will never be instantiated. But things that are derived from it have to implement those things. So we can have some protected X and Y. So protected int X, protected int Y. So X and Y coordinates. Let's think. So I want to kind of also have like a Boolean of whether it's been removed or not. So I'll make that private because that's going to have like a getter and setter anyway, in a way. So we'll say private is removed equals false to start with. Oh, let's actually make a Boolean first. Boolean is removed. Let's zoom in a bit actually, so we got a little bit more clarity of this. So I also want to make kind of a checker to see if it's removed, and it's going to, funnily enough, have the same name. So let's have a public Boolean is removed function or method, and all it'll return is removed. Then we want to be able to remove it. So public void remove. And all this is going to do, it's going to set is removed equal to true. Then I want to be able to get X and get Y. So we'll say public int get X, return X, and public int get Y, return Y. Then finally, I want some sort of init function. So public void init. And eventually that's going to take in something like some sort of thing like a map or a level or something. But for now, that's fine. So that's a starting point to get us into some sort of a structure there. Now, what I'd also like is some movable objects. So I'm going to make like a base movable object class. So let's say a new, first I'll make a new package for all the movable objects, so mobs. Yeah, all of the different mobs that could be. And inside the mobs, we're going to have a new mob class. Oops. Now, the mob class is going to inherit from the entity class. Yeah. So we're going to say, okay, class mob extends entity. And because it extends entity and it's not, well, this is also going to be abstract, I think, really. Purely because we are going to also be extending this such as we make different movable objects. So this can be abstract as well. But this is going to add a move method. So say public void move int, let's think. So we want like an X offset and a Y offset to move by. I don't know. Do we want? How about dx and dy? We want some sort of a delta x and delta y. Let's do it that way. And that will be depending upon what the movable object is as to what that does. So we've now got this abstract mob class based upon the abstract entity class, where if we want to make a mob, we derive the mob class. If we want to make another entity, we can always make another abstract master sort of subclass of entity that can then be derived from. So that'll do for a basic sort of entity. We're not making like an entity component system yet. We're just sort of basic entities with inheritance and a little bit of interface to actually make some interesting stuff. So in theory, we have enough to get started and moving on to the next thought process of what we want. But I think that should do. All I need to do now is run it and make sure it doesn't break. Should be fine. I don't think we've done any breaking changes on this. Yep, so it's still running perfectly fine. We're still able to use the keyboard to move up, to move off the screen all over the place and change colors of the background at the same time. There we go. So that's still working perfectly fine. So I think I'm going to take another tea break and I shall kind of see you in the next sort of stint of what we're doing.